there's a film event in D.C. that's becoming one of the most talked about series around town. It's put on by the Initiative for Russian Culture at American University, and it's run by Anton Fedyashin. He's a professor of history at AU. He's also the initiative's executive director, and he joins us now in the studio. Anton Fedyashin, welcome back.
Thank you very much for having me, Rob.
So tell us about this film series. What was the idea for getting it started?
The film series is an integral part of the Initiative for Russian Culture, which was created in 2011 by American University with the generous and visionary support of our donor and the founder of the program, Susan Lehrman, and in partnership with the Embassy of the Russian Federation here, on whose grounds we actually host the screenings. And the idea behind this was to expose American students to Russian culture, to allow them to experience what the Russians have gone through historically through screenings of classic Soviet and good contemporary Russian films, so that there is a conversation going on between the American youth and the Russians themselves, Russian culture. And
some people may be surprised to know that there is a full movie theater within the Russian embassy. Can you tell us about the venue there?
Yes. The ambassador of the Russian Federation, Sergei Kislyak, has been very generous and has been a very gracious host. The embassy opens its gates up to several hundred students. The Tunlaw Theater, which has just been renovated about 2 years ago, seats about 350. And we have been steadily filling in the entire space. We bus students from the consortium universities in Washington, D.C. for free to our events, and we bus them back after they're over. So we do a screening a month, and in this theater, on the grounds of the Russian embassy, it's a great experience to actually watch Russian and Soviet films on what is legally Russian soil.
And tell us about some of the films you've screened. What are some of the ones that have provoked the most thoughtful conversation and dialogue afterward?
One of the great successes that we've pulled off was actually the marathon screening of Sergei Bondarchuk's 7.5-hour epic called War and Peace. We did it in one day with a breakfast, a lunch, and a tea served in between, about 2-hour segments. And we did that last November of 2012 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of the Napoleonic invasion of Russia. And that went off absolutely magnificently. A lot of people showed up. We had over 250 people watching the film in installments. Another very popular film that we showed from post-Soviet Russia was Styagi, which is often translated as hipsters. We showed this in the spring of 2012, and it was a spectacular success with a very active discussion afterwards. We screen a film, and then after the film is done, we do about 25 minutes of Q&A with a local, usually American, expert on Russian or Soviet films, so that the audience has a chance to discuss the main ideas and the biography of the director and the general historical context of the film.
What are some of the questions that you hear? I know for each film it's different, but are there certain things in general that American students want to know about either contemporary Russia or Russia during the Soviet era that you hear over and over again?
One of the persistent questions, which goes to the very heart of Russian culture and the Russian psyche, is about the emotionality of Russian films. American students and our guests catch on to the very deeply felt emotions that are put on screen by Russian directors and screenwriters. And this has often to do, of course, most often to do with the experience of the Second World War and its aftermath. For example, we did a series of films from the Khrushchev thaw era of the late 1950s, in which the emphasis in the story about the Second World War is placed on the experiences of ordinary Russian people as opposed to the Soviet leadership, which was popular under Stalin. And so we get a lot of questions about the emotional experiences of the characters.
You think about American films, and maybe more so films of the 80s or 90s, like The Hunt for Red October or even Rocky IV, where the Russians are the bad guys. And that is what American culture has portrayed Russia as. What is the reaction then when you have Americans seeing Russians as the good guys or simply not the bad guys, as something broader than just that characteristic way of depicting Russians?
This is actually one of the key components and an inspiration for the establishment of the Initiative for Russian Culture, which was to help Americans see beyond the stereotypes that most of these kids have inherited back from the Cold War era. And we see these stereotypes come out in the current press on a regular basis, both in Russia and in the United States. The reaction that I've seen so far has been very encouraging, because a lot of the kids realize that the stereotypes that come from the Hollywood blockbusters of the late Cold War era really eclipse the true experience of what it means to be a Russian or a Soviet citizen in the second half of the 20th century. So what we're trying to do is lay the foundation, a sort of infrastructure, if you will, for an enhanced and more mutually respectful dialogue between the two countries.
So let's talk about this event, too. You know, a lot of these film series, you show up and it's not that opulent. But here you're at the Russian embassy. You're having a really nice experience in a beautiful theater, and you're getting food and drinks. Talk to me about just what it's like to put on a series like this and to have it be a place where people really enjoy their evening, and it's not just a small rec room event that a lot of times you get on college campuses.
It's definitely not a small rec room event, and we have Susan Lehrman's generosity and the Russian Embassy's hospitality to thank for that. The evening begins with free buses that pick up students on their campuses and bring them to the Russian Embassy. They then walk into the Tunlaw Annex of the Russian Embassy, which is not just a movie theater, but a two-story, two-floor club area. And so on both floors, there is food. So we start the evening with about an hour-long dinner where people meet and mingle and discuss the previous event and discuss what they expect to see that night. The food is free. It's provided both by the Initiative for Russian Culture and by the Russian Embassy, and it's genuine Russian cuisine. So a lot of Americans get to try their authentic agavia salad and borscht and pirashki and many other things for the first time when they are actually at the embassy. Then the screening begins, which usually takes, as long as the film lasts. And then we have a Q&A afterwards in which we give the audience a chance to discuss the film with each other and to ask questions of the experts. And then afterwards, we have a dessert for about 45 minutes, which the embassy and the Initiative for Russian Culture also provide. So this is a sort of a complex event, which has proved to be exceptionally popular because we bus students not only from all of the consortium universities within the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, but we also have kids from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, whom we bus from Baltimore. They've expressed an interest in coming, and we have a steady number of about between 20 and 30 kids that come from Baltimore.
That's great. So can you tell us about the next upcoming event?
We've got a screening on the 14th of November at the Russian Embassy. It will be Mikhail Kalatozov's classic 1959 film called The Unsent Letter, Неотправленное письмо in Russian. And it's about the sort of the romance of Siberian exploration for diamonds, which was very popular in the 1950s as the Soviet Union was beginning to really explore the natural resources of the Siberian subcontinent, if you can call it that. And the screening is actually geared to coincide with an exhibit of Siberian photographs that is opening at the Katzen Museum at American University. It's an exhibit of Russian photographers and their view, their interpretation of Siberia between the 1860s and the current era, the 2000 teens rather. So it's a sort of a complex event, and we hope that our guests will enjoy it.
Sounds great. That is Anton Fedyashin. He is a professor of history at American University. He is also the executive director of the Initiative for Russian Culture, also at AU. Anton Fedyashin, thanks so much for coming in our studio.
Thank you very much for having me again.